There are 5 mixing decisions that separate amateur mixes from professional ones, and I see beginners get all 5 wrong. The worst part, these aren't about fancy plugins or expensive gear, they're about how you think and how you approach a mix. Let me show you how the pros do it differently. Hi, my name is Nico and I've mixed over 100 songs this year. When I listen to amateur mixes, I hear the 5 same mistakes over and over. Today I'm gonna break down each one of them and I'm gonna show you a professional approach to level up your mixes instantly. The first amateur mistake is slapping a plugin without proper gain staging and leveling. Clipping plugins make them impossible to control, as well as having too much gain or not enough gain. So it's important to control the level and gauge staging before you start anything. Every track should have a decent level. It gives the plugin headroom to work properly. It doesn't necessarily have to be a specific number, but you want to make sure that you build a system that works for your workflow and that you can repeat and be super consistent with it. When the levels are set right from the start, compressors and EQ work the way they're designed to work. If the level and gain stagings are wrong, you're fighting problems that you've created before you even started mixing. So the setup I use is you want to make sure you have all your faders at 0. Look at your audio file, make sure nothing peaks, make sure nothing is like very faint or noisy. From there, I use clip gain to make sure everything is set the way I like it. You should have things gain stage so that your mix already sound balanced even without starting to mix, if that makes sense. There are a few exceptions where you don't necessarily want to have the signal too loud, things such as hi-hat, especially when they're live, or cymbals. That's totally okay to be on the more conservative side. You really want to have that sense of balance with your audio even before you start mixing. The second one is subtractive EQ before additive. An amateur mistake would be to start boosting things to make them punch out, boost highs to make things brighter, boost lows if you want more body. The mix will sound muddy and harsh, and that's a telltale sign of an amateur mix. What pro mixers do is they start by filtering and cutting things out first. You always want to start cutting before boosting. If the voice sounds muddy, you don't want to start adding highs. You want to look for that area 200 to 400 hertz and carve out the mud. Why it matters is cutting the problems creates space for other elements. Cutting first unmasks certain frequencies. Cutting up and filtering things out clean up a mix way faster than the other way around. The third thing is vocal compression or compression in general. That's a big one. The amateur mistake is they will use compression to make things louder. Slam a compressor on, lower the threshold, slam things until it sounds fuller. The sound is going to end up smaller and lifeless. What a pro mixer does is they use the compressor to shape the tone. What that means is using a specific compressor or compressor color to shape the texture and the tone and using it as your advantage. Using a compressor such as an 1176 type that is very fast, that's going to make your vocal punch and forward, or using an SSL bus compressor on your drums or on your mix to create a sense of glue. Using LA2A style compressor to make the sound more smooth and warmer. If you're using the compressor only for volume, you're missing about 80% of what you can do with it. One quick action you can do is pick a compressor and learn its character. First use it maybe on 3 different sources and try to notice how it affects the lows, the mids, and the highs, as well as the transients. To listen properly, you want to focus on a specific area. So focusing on the low end, for example, you can hear a compressor might carve out some of the low end, might boost some of the low mids instead, or can enhance the low end. If you can properly use your compressor as a tone shaper, you're not gonna have to rely on EQing as hard, you're gonna have less phase shifting, and you're gonna have a cleaner mix in general. The fourth secret is referencing tracks throughout your mixing process. The amateur mixer will mix for hours in isolation without referencing anything, just thinking they're doing the best they can with what they have. Then they export the mix, it sounds muddy, it sounds thin, it sound too loud, it just sound off compared to a professional mix. What pro mixers do is they constantly A/B and reference against something to make sure they have a right direction and a right target for the mix. You want to A/B while you're mixing against a production mix or a reference mix to make sure you're aiming into the right direction. You want to keep your ears honest. You want to make sure what you're doing is making a better mix that you had and not worse. So a good way of doing it, if you don't have a good production mix of your song, is loading a professional mix that you like. Make sure the level is at the same level as your mix. And then while you're mixing, just go back and forth and listen for specific area like like vocal level, drum level, bass. Any professional mixers always references something to make sure they're on the right track. And the fifth and final secret is take breaks to check your ears. The biggest amateur mistake is to mix for 4 or 6 hours straight without taking break, thinking that the harder you work at something, the better it's gonna get. Every decision you make after mixing straight for 2 hours, I would be careful and is a bit suspicious. How many times as an amateur mixer you wake up the next day and you listen to your mix and it's just not what you remember, or it just sounds horrendous? What pros do is they mix in block. You mix for maybe 45 minutes to an hour, you take a 10 to 15 minute break and you go back to it. Walk away from the studio, reset your ear, listen to something else. Once you come back to your mix, you listen with a fresh perspective and fresh ears. Why it matters is ear fatigue is real. Your hearing literally changes that are not even there. The longer you listen to something, the more your brain compensate for things and adapts. Taking breaks is just a must for any professional mixers. If you're not used to taking break, a good way of doing it is simply having a timer for every 45 minutes and take a break when that timer goes off. I know this can be difficult, especially if you're trying to finish something, but trust me, you're gonna speed up your process and end up finishing mixes more objectively and faster. So those are my 5 pro secret or tips to get you to mix better and faster. None of these cost money, but require a lot of discipline. On the next video, I'm gonna go through my mixing template and show exactly what I'm doing for a full mix. Make sure you subscribe so you don't miss it, and I'll see you on the next one.